We have three great talks for you after lunch, and our first one is going to be presented to us by Tiberius Hefflin, who is a recent computer security graduate who lives in Portland, Oregon, who evangelizes for privacy and security while doing security assurance work for Portland General Electric. Today, she's going to be telling us that security starts with you. Social engineering. Please make Tiberius welcome.
So, yeah, hi, I'm Tiberius, and I'm paranoid that my employer doesn't have to be. So a lot of the theme of this talk will center around a healthy dose of paranoia. We're going to be talking about social engineering, and it's really easy to have a nebulous idea of what social engineering is. A lot of people include malicious intent, in that some people don't. I've even met some security professionals who would define even the act of trying to befriend somebody as a type of social engineering. For this talk, I would like to define social engineering as an attempt to acquire sensitive information for malicious reasons through deception. I think that it just makes it a little bit simpler if we all have the same definition that we're working to. So social engineering works really to exploit cognitive biases in human behavior, especially those that we learn as children, like trust, politeness, and trying to be helpful. Especially in the US, it's a really big thing to always tell people to have a nice day. And so through kind of using those inclinations against people, it's really interesting what you can do. Social engineering relies on direct or implied non-truths in order to get a target to act in a way that they normally wouldn't. There's lots of ways to lie. Lies are generally pretty easy. I can quite happily say that I'm 6 foot tall. That doesn't necessarily make it believable. The believability in a lie is within the framing of the lie. And it's within these framings that we can see the common threads between different types of lies in order to categorize them and find ways to kind of work against them. So we're going to look at some tactics that are common and not so common in social engineering. The first one is tailgating. There's also kind of a subcategory of piggybacking. This one is generally pretty well known. Companies tend to be pretty good at least trying to enforce a policy against them. Most people have badges that they use to get into their work. So tailgating is when somebody follows you into a secure area after you've badged in. Tailgating is when they do it without you really realizing, whereas piggybacking is when they get you to be complicit with their act of sneaking in behind you. Your coworker who always forgets their badge. It's a really good example of that. So one of the risks of this is that, physical access to any system is kind of a dangerous thing if you don't want somebody to have that access. So, theft of equipment, theft of proprietary hardware, theft of software, proprietary software, loss of intellectual property, and workplace violence. I actually read an instance where somebody tailgated in order to hurt somebody within a company. So there's a lot at risk when it comes to tailgating that companies sometimes don't explain to their employees. It works. It works because people want to be friendly and helpful. Your coworker who's forgotten their badge, you want to help them. You don't want to be the jerk that says, no, you have to go to security, mate. And so when hackers try to to employ this, there's a lot of kind of covers that they can use. They could be an overburdened delivery guy or the pizza guy who's just been asked to bring pizza in. The delivery guy, like a UPS guy, is really common around kind of Christmas time when there's more packages being delivered and people don't examine credentials quite so much. But the key here is that the hacker is trying to get legitimacy through getting an employee to buy into their story. Phishing is, we don't really sometimes think of that as a form of social engineering, but it's a really big aspect to it. This is trying to get sensitive information through a deceptive email that masquerades as a trustworthy source. I'm sure that we've all had, we've all had that happen once or twice. The instances of phishing emails are going up. They're becoming a lot more common. So the trick with phishing is that it's a wide net activity. They send emails out to as many people as they can, looking for just that couple of people who don't realize and take the bait. We see this most commonly with the Nigerian prince emails. It's also called a 419 or advanced fee fraud scheme. So for those who maybe aren't as familiar, this is when you receive an email saying that they're from a bank or some type of institution, they have a lot of money, and they need to move it out of the country or into the country, or they need your help to move this money around, and they're willing to give you a cut of that money in order to get your help. And what happens is you give them a little bit of money that they ask for, and then suddenly there's problems. They need to pay a fee, they need to bribe somebody, and so they ask you for more information, for more money. And as you give them more money, more issues arrive, and they keep asking for more. And as soon as you say no, they disappear, and the money that you've given them disappears with them. Now these emails, well, not emails, but the underlying tactics of this type of scam have been around actually since the 1920s. It started with letters, and then as fax machines became more common, they started coming through fax, and now they're coming through email. It's so common that the American Secret Service actually have an address that people can write to tell them about instances where they've fallen prey to such scams. So in March, just as a kind of example of this, in March, a company in the US called Pivotal was subject to a attack. And what happened in this attack is the hacker, the scammer, did their research. They found out who in the company works in finance, and they sent an email to this person claiming to be from the CEO, asking them for tax information for many of the employees in the company. And not realizing anything was wrong, the gentleman followed through, pulled the information together, and sent that off in reply to the email. Unfortunately, the email did not actually come from the CEO. It came from a still unknown source who now has all these people's tax information, which leads them open to identity theft. So with this is an example of spear phishing, which is a targeted attack that usually involves a lot of research first. They know who their target is, which makes them a little bit more difficult to catch. There's also another kind of similar type of attack called a whale phishing attack, which is aimed at high monetary targets. So CEOs are quite likely to be the target of that type of attack. There's a new kind of attack that's becoming more common, called an angler phishing attack, which is when a scammer will create an account looking like a customer service account for a service provider, and then looking on social media for people to complain and say that they're having a problem with that particular service. And then they'll email their target saying, I saw your email, I saw your tweet, or I saw your post on Facebook, and I'd like to help you with your problem. Please give me your login details. These are really highly personalized, really clever, and they can be really difficult to spot. Kind of as a follow-on, a lot of these, particularly the emails, give you a link to connect to, or they sometimes have a file within them asking you to download the file. Perhaps it's claiming it's a PDF or something. And these often, more commonly now, have ransomware within them. Ransomware is becoming a lot bigger issue now. And what happens when you download this is that it actually encrypts a portion of your hard drive. It focuses on folders that are known to have sensitive information in them, and then pops up with a screen saying, you're now encrypted, please send us so much money in Bitcoins. And these are becoming really, really common. Without a good backup, some companies have been forced to actually pay out. As of April, CNBC, which is a news source in the States, estimates that just in the US alone, 209 million has been actually lost due to ransomware. So it's definitely a large problem, and we're still looking at ways to really combat that, which is why awareness of phishing and the hallmarks of those types of emails is an important thing to look for and to be educated on. So this is an example phishing email that I actually received this morning. I don't know if you can have a quick look over that and count how many indicators you can find that this is not a real email from Apple. But these are the ones that I found. So you can see they've spelt Apple wrong in the supposed email address, which is there to cover up this other email address that has nothing to do with Apple. The Apple logo is entirely not quite right. I don't know if I've ever seen Apple add TM next to their name, so you know it's trademarked. And then they're urging you to take quick action so that you don't lose your services, which is another hallmark of these types of emails. They want to get you emotionally invested. They want you to be concerned so that you aren't thinking rationally. They also ask you to click on a link within the email. And in this case, the email or the link actually goes to meccornbread.com. I don't know if I've ever heard of Apple using that particular domain, and enter your account information there to ensure the security of your account. So these are the things to look for: the spelling errors, the strange kind of formatting. The fact that Apple don't appear to know my name is a little concerning, since they're telling me my account has been locked. And certainly don't click on links within the email. You can hover over the link to see where it's directed to. So the next kind of topic is pretexting, which is often called blagging in Scotland. And this is the act of spinning a story, an invented scenario, to get people to act in a way that they might not do otherwise. So one of the most interesting for me stories that comes of pretexting is from Bagnale Jr., who is kind of the king of this. When he was in his 19s and when he was about 19, 20, he actually convinced Pan Am Airlines that he was a pilot for them who was out and about flying planes and had lost his uniform while at a hotel having it laundered. And through talking to a woman on the phone and creating a fake document showing his credentials, he was able to find out from the last day at Pan Am on the phone where they got their uniforms from, and then go there and actually get a spare uniform or a uniform from them, which he then used to go on numerous flights as a pilot and fly a plane. I'd like to think that this is not as easy now, but it's hard to say. So in the US, we have grandma scams even, that are really, really common. You'll get a phone call from somebody going, "Hello, grandma, is that you?" And they'll try and convince you that they're having problems and that they need money. My grandmother actually had a call like this, and she was really, really proud when she told me. She says, "I heard the guy say my name or tell me that he was having trouble in Mexico." And she goes, "I said, 'David, is that you?' He's like, 'Yeah, grandma, it's me.' And she said, 'I don't have a grandson named David,' and hung up on him." So it's great that she thought that through, but it also tells me that all of my paranoia and telling her to be careful and warning her about these things does eventually get through. I actually heard about instances here in Australia. You have what are called cold call investment scams, where people will call up generally older targets and convince them to invest in what they're calling high yield stock. They take their money and they run. Apparently, this averages between 20 to 30,000 from each victim they actually get to give them money. So it's not a US problem, and it's not an Australian problem, or it's not a regionalized thing. It's everywhere. I think that the types of scams that you get tend to be regionalized, though. They look for what will work within the society and the kind of the way that people think within a local area. So when talking about pretexting, I've used a lot of examples because they are invented scenarios, and it's really difficult to tell you exactly what's going to be said. The way to combat this is to be suspicious. If something seems off, or if it seems too true, if somebody seems too nosy, or they know too much, start asking questions, start trying to pull apart their story and ensure that what this person is trying to sell you is a real thing. So baiting is like the real world Trojan horse. It's a really interesting phenomenon, and it's actually when a attacker will leave something out for a target to find. Most common one that I've seen recently is USB drives, just leaving them out. This comes from a study where about 300 USBs were put out across a university campus, and they waited to see how many people picked them up and how many people actually used them. As you can see, if the devices had actually had malware on them, it would have been a very, very useful attack. So the best way to stop and to protect yourself from social engineering attacks is being aware and having personal vigilance. From a company's point of view, this makes uneducated employees their number one weakness. If people don't understand why they should do something, they're going to cut corners for convenience. Just quickly, because I'm running out of time. In HR, they've known that people who are engaged are more productive. It's very well known, and they're more willing to go to bat for the company. So why do companies fail to get buy-in from their most valuable employee, or from their most valuable assets, the people on the front lines? It's because they don't prioritize security education, or they don't deliver at all. Others focus on compliance and use click-through e-learning that doesn't actually educate people. And it's hard to trust users that you know have subpar training. There's also an element of budgetary constraints. So properly training people is expensive, so companies rely on tools to protect while minimizing user interactions. This is great from a technology standpoint, but it can't actually help all the time. So how do we change, and how do we move forward? Well, we need to recognize that it's a cultural issue, and it's not just an IT issue. So we need to get rid of the e-learning. We need to use recurring bite-sized training. I would recommend classroom and video training that happens regularly to keep it fresh in people's minds and engage people by showing them how it applies to them personally and not just the company. So I've covered a lot, and I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to sum up. To learn more, I would recommend reading Kevin Mitnick or Frank Bagnale Jr.'s stories. It's really interesting to see what they were capable of doing when they were active. And this is where you can get further information if you're so inclined. So thank you. It's been great.
So I have a microphone here. If you would like to use this microphone to ask Tiberius a question, please raise your hand and I'll run it over to you. Okay, you and then you.
Cheers. Thanks for that. I was just regarding the phishing emails. I've read that a lot of the time the scammers might intentionally put things like spelling mistakes or using obviously dodgy trademarks as a way of filtering out people that might know better. Do you give them credit for that, or is
yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that I've seen happen a lot. In fact, if you follow the link that's on that email, because I did, that actually looks a lot more professional. It actually looks like something that you could think was a real website or a real Apple website if it weren't for the web address at the top. So if you were looking at that from a phone, sometimes phone browsers mask the address. It would look very legitimate.
I'd just like to get your thoughts on best practices for email. So at least in Australia, when you get an email from a bank, it will never have a URL of any kind in it. It'll say, go to your internet banking and do X, Y, Z. However, I've noticed that PayPal and eBay don't follow that. You can get a legitimate email from either of those organizations that has a link in it. And if it's a legit email, you'll go to the legit site and all's good. What are your thoughts on those? What are your thoughts on that? Is putting web links in email for sensitive things ever, behind authentication obviously, ever a good idea? And if so, are there guidelines like make sure the link text is actually the URL or something like that?
In my opinion, I think that we really need to move away from that. We need to stop putting links in emails, and what I would like to see done is moving towards a more secure email system. Not necessarily email, but a lot of companies now will send you a mail saying you have something in your email, in your inbox with us, and so you go to their website, you log in, and you've got a mail there, and that has the sensitive information in it. And I think that that's a better solution. As frustrating and annoying as it is to have to kind of take those steps, I think that it's a better way of doing business until we find a more secure kind of communication source than email.
Are there any other questions here? Oh, I'm going to run over here and then here.
Hi. So I think I've read an article about a jury decision that you couldn't consider information stored on your computer not accessible to third parties because people's computers are usually compromised. So with emails not containing personal information, not containing links, and so on. Do you have a question? Yes. Is it a good practice to encourage people to not do all these things so that instead of educating users to secure their systems, look at the links, we actually work around the problems and create more further problems down the track?
I think that you need to recognize that there are some people you can educate and some people who are not going to listen or don't have the technological understandings to be able to understand the education that's being provided them. There's a whole lot of people out there that never had computers until they were in their later years in life, and so we need to find solutions for everybody. So while we should combat the problems on an educational front, I think that it's important to also combat the problems in a way that the average user can understand.
Passwords, two-factor authentication. What's the best way to convince people to actually, use them?
Enforce it. Give them no choice. I will say that it's really interesting with two-factor authentication. Some solutions are better than others. I've had problems with the Google Authenticator working with Gmail at all. So I've had to be on the texting rather than using their authenticator for two-factor. And it's been really frustrating. And I think we need to get better with the technology and we need to enforce it.
Hi. Do you think there's any value in actually trying to convince banks and things like that to use email certificates to provide actual validation of origin, or do you think users would just never adjust? Or something else?
I really want to see a better solution than email. And while using certified email and even using like PGP and having that be done that way, I think that we're past that point. Some of these solutions are so complex that certain users and certain user groups just will never be able to use them. So as I said before, I think we need to find solutions that work for everybody.
Oh.
My experience has been a lot of companies are still really bad at this, whether it's phone calls where they ask you to authenticate you to the bank or emails with links and stuff like that. Do you have any, from your experience actually working with companies to do this, how to get that feedback to the right person, how to make sure companies improve?
I think it's really difficult because even being a security person within a firm that has the same issues, it's really difficult to affect change without getting C-level buy-in. So I think that it's just important to continually repeat the message. And even if you're telling this to your bank teller or to the person on the phone that you're not giving them your information, but you'll call back, the more people that do that, the more that will get fed back.
Thanks for the talk. Being in a probably bigger company, do you see any value in running internal scamming attacks to then be able to teach your employees about what could have possibly gone wrong?
Yeah, we actually, we do that regularly within my company, and we have seen the effects that it reduces. We certainly, you're never going to catch everybody every time, but there's definitely been an improvement. However, we have seen our success go a little too far because we'll see users who catch on really quick and they'll email other people within the company saying, oh, I saw this phishing attack, don't click on the link, which is great that they're trying to educate each other. However, it makes it a lot more difficult for us to gauge who we need to educate further and who we don't.
This has been a really good Q&A. I think we have time for one more question. So if there, cool, we have one more question. Excellent.
One of the attacks that you mentioned was it Pretext? Spinning a story to get information. What would you say is the best way to circumvent, like incrementally obtaining information through, like, so, say one system of authentication requires, your date of birth and your last name or something, but you can get the date of birth through, spinning a story with another service. If you're targeting an attack, what would you say is the best?
I think that when you're spreading your attacks over different companies, that fragmentation is going to provide you a little more success than just focusing in on one target. But I think the important thing to do is to keep your information as secure as you can. And when somebody asks you for information over the phone, to challenge them and to double check. Always try and verify from a third source that it's a legitimate query, especially if it's something that's out of the ordinary. So, for example, the guy that supposedly got the email from the CEO, What he should have done is he should have then called the CEO and double-checked. So I think that it's really important to kind of get in that mindset of friendly but skeptical with any kind of request for information.
Okay, well, that is the end of our Q&A session. As a token of our appreciation for your talk, we have this wonderful sailing tram coffee mug for you.
That's great, thank you.
Everybody, please thank Tiberius for the wonderful talk.